All right. Check, check, check. All right. Good. Everything looks good. I'm setting up my microphone for the first time, really live. Well, not for the first time today. And so everything looks good from what I could see. But I'm going to go ahead and hear myself. I don't think you'll be able to hear me, but I'm going to go ahead and hear myself on the YouTube. Good. Audio sounds great, according to my wonderful professor. Yes. 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 So far on YouTube, it sounds really good too. And I would just say, like, even though the camera's been off for a few weeks, or actually since I, started, since the fall, picked up streams ever since I got a new computer. I will say that I would like to resume doing the camera probably after next, probably after the new year. And maybe you think the new year that's such an arbitrary time. Like, why not start this week? But I've been really busy. It's been a pretty full few months. Obviously because of the wedding, but even with the wedding done, there are just projects to do, and I've been very busy with two different jobs. And because of that, I just want to pretty much work on creative stuff until the last minute, and being on camera takes time. You gotta like clean up your room, make sure you're presentable and stuff like that. So that will happen once January hits. And the reason why I have chosen January is because I will only be working one job after the Christmas season, and that is a job, which we will be probably talking about right now. So yeah, let's go ahead and welcome the chat. Thank you guys for all attending, especially after this Thanksgiving weekend. I hope you guys have been doing well this Thanksgiving weekend. I feel it was definitely a full Thanksgiving for sure between Professor Geek and me. And I feel like we're just recovering from the busy 2 days, and I could use an extra day off. But unfortunately, tomorrow is a completely full day teaching, or not just teaching, I do retail too. And that's gonna be like from 10 a.m. to like almost 8 p.m. So this is my last day off until the next weekend, which is fine. That's just part of life. Let's go ahead and welcome the chat. We've got Brian Gilmartin as our first. He says, a teacher rant sounds interesting. I sure hope so. Lynn Green will be joining the replay at work tomorrow. So hopefully you are having a good Thanksgiving weekend, Lynn. We got Studio Super, welcome. And I also put in Studio Super's Twitter handle. I'm actually not on Twitter myself, but I did ask him where people can find him and his art. So I believe that is the official Twitter handle, if I'm correct in that. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yep. There he goes. Thank you for the shout out. Yes, you are welcome. Good. I'm glad I got that name right. So yeah, absolutely. Especially with your animation style, it's unique, but it's also it doesn't go beyond good convention. Yeah, it's looking good. As I know when I first started streaming, I mentioned this before too. I guess it's worth mentioning a few years down the road as well. Obviously, people who've listened to me for a few years know that I'm Christian, so I do try to endorse the more modest art. And even if there is more R-rated art, I try to be very selective about what I do endorse. But a lot of your stuff is not on the R-rated side of the spectrum, so that is also good. Like more kid friendly, I would say. Some of your art, and it looks good. It looks good. And we got Ace. Welcome to. It's good to see you. We also have Samuel Proctor. It's always good to have you back, Samuel Proctor. I mean, it's. I'm so glad you returned after your 2 years away, and I knew you would, and I'm very happy that you did. Big Al Presents says hello, everyone. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you did too, my friend. It will be, I think, like 3 Saturdays from now, where we will be visiting you, Big Al, my friend. So that's gonna be fun. I love visiting you when we can. It's definitely a full day, but the drive up there is really nice looking, and it's so winter has finally come. I'm so happy. And Andreas Hernandez, good. Yeah, Yubnub. I don't know where that came from, but yeah, Yubnub. Reminds me of we were talking about Star Wars with Professor's Aunt Debbie, and she had a name for the Yub-Nubs or the Ewoks, and but we'll refrain from saying it here. But we just died laughing when she said it. I was like, "No, that's not their name." She's like, "Isn't that their names?" I'm like, "No, that's not their names." Yeah. So, oh, Deep Pensac, welcome. Nice to see you. All right. So I think that's everyone here. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I'm gonna put it. Professor Geek's aunt. Her son loved Star Wars, everything Star Wars when he grew up as a kid, and she thought the Ewoks were called wee wees. When we first heard that, especially with her real thick Southern accent, we were in tears, just laughing so hard. Like, no, that's not what they're called. Yeah. Uh, so anyway, so hopefully everyone is having a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. Hopefully it's been a long weekend, but I know people are kind of getting back into the swing of things tomorrow. Thank you for joining, Eloise. Hello to you too. And honestly, I don't know how long this if I could talk, I don't know how long this stream is going to be. I think I'll probably cut it off within the hour since there's just been a lot I've had to do as of late. But it's gonna be a pretty casual conversation, and it is more a teacher rant. Just noticing some things as I'm getting more students this year, which is great. But it can also be applied not just to teachers and ranting on teachers, but I think it could just be applied to any kind of vocation or any kind of pursuit. Thank you, Studio Super, for the super chat. Do you have any artists? You know, um, you know, off the top of my head, the go-to that I would say is Ralph McQuarrie, the concept artist for Star Wars, among other sci-fi franchises. I mean, he did work on Dune. I need to be better with artist names myself. I do think I should be a little bit more responsible with the visual art stuff. But I do love my favorite artists are those who do more of the sci-fi concept pieces, especially landscapes. That old atomic punk. Um, there was actually just a recent passing too. Forgive me. You guys might know the name. In fact, if it's not Studio Super, it's probably going to be Big Al. Uh, and he's one of you guys are going to answer for me. But there was a recent passing. It was the artist who did the movie poster for Jaws and The Empire Strikes Back. That kind of art too, that old well, it's not that old. I mean, it's just that 70s getting into the 80s classic style, but also coming from the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and 60s with that painting kind of look. I like that as well. So if you guys wanted to, uh, put that in before I look it up. But he recently passed. I think he was like 92 years old, and it was the artist who did the poster for Jaws and also the Empire Strikes Back. So, yes, D. Penzak says, "Do you have the Ralph McQuarrie Volume 2 book of the concept art for Star Wars?" Maybe Prof has. I don't have any of the Star Wars anthology, all those compilations of stuff. He's really big on more of the whether written anthologies or the art or the character. Kind of like that old school, video game manual where it tells you like the world and the characters, but I do not have that myself. One of these days when we have a little bit more discretionary income, there are a few things that I would like. I mean, oh, okay, so actually, Studio Super, to answer give you a couple other answers. I really, really, really do like the big names that we've seen in pop culture, and those are John Howe and Alan Lee. I While I wouldn't hire Alan Lee to do any of concept pieces for even if I wrote fantasy, which I don't, I write science fiction, I still like his style. I think his style with the kind of the white tracing around the shapes and the shadows and stuff like that just is so it is so Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit cover particularly is my favorite. I mean, both John Howe and Alan Lee, but particularly the Alan Lee drawing and illustration and I think a little bit of paint work too is probably my favorite. Like it just speaks Lord of the Rings. He is the Lord of the Rings artist. So I do like those as far as fantasy. Ring of Edwin, thank you so much for the super chat. Will you be doing a video with Big Al during your visit? That's actually up to Big Al. So, I mean, it's up to him. Like we can like do it in the form of like a vertical video, but it's totally up to what he likes. But sometimes we do take pictures. I think when Fanman was visiting Big Al before for our wedding, he and Prof made a trip over to Big Al's. Um, and then they did some pictures that were pretty wonderful. Yeah, so at the very least, we'd probably take some pictures and stuff like that, but totally Big Al's call for sure. Um, Amy L, welcome. And, you know what? NXZW, if you have a name, or unless you want me to call you that, let me know. But I'm happy to call you NXCW too. It sounds like is that like a call sign? I don't think that's a call sign, but maybe like it sounds like a radio, not a ham radio thing, but kind of like a radio station. But I want to know what those letters mean, if it's of course appropriate. Yeah. Um, let's see. Eldridge fan says to Hernandez saying, "You're a failed teacher. I tried to get in, but everyone was double dipping or using English as a dumping ground for coaches, and all the kids were insufferable." I will say, like, teaching is not for everyone. I'm not saying this of you. Maybe it was just a bad first experience. And I will say this too: if you ever think to becoming a teacher, even not even a public school teacher, not even a college teacher, uh, or an elementary school teacher, just that even if you have the chops for what you do, teaching does take practice. Like, you won't instantly be rock solid your first day or your first year, especially when it comes to classroom management. I don't deal with classroom management. I'm a one-on-one basis, which is nice. I've taught classrooms. I have taught music classrooms before, up to 68th graders, and I was fine, but it wasn't something I wanted to do as a career. But it's definitely not for everyone. Private Eye, welcome. Good to have you. And we'll get into the stuff first, or we'll get into the chat first before just that. It's probably gonna be a pretty short rant. I didn't prepare at all. Yeah, Ace, I agree. There needs to be a large format collection of books for Ralph McQuarrie's portfolio for various films he designed for. Yeah, yeah, or even just books too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he did stuff for Asimov and Ray Bradbury as well. Oh, okay, so Professor Geek says he does not have that book yet, but he needs to buy it. Yeah, there are some. Yeah, well, I was saying if we have more discretionary income years down the road, I would love like a really nice hardcover collection of all the Middle Earth books, including the main ones with the hardcover Alan Lee or John Howe or even another concept artist who's really good, but something that looks really nice. Some physical book that looks really nice. Yes, NXZW. Yes, I did know. He was John Williams was the composer behind the Cantina Band. Yep. Yep. Yes, thank you, D Pensac. You say is that his name? Was the artist of Jaws Roger Costell, I think? I thought it was spelled with an A, but yeah. Yeah. Studio Super, thank you so much again for the super chat. Um, I know he ain't an artist, but I love how Stanley talked about wanting art in his comics to be dramatic to the point where he'd acted out himself. Coworkers would would think he was being attacked. Yeah, I think I've seen that, not specifically with Stan Lee. I've seen that with definitely even with Pixar's motion capture, where the actors had to really exaggerate what these, first time digital characters were doing, and it's but it's fun to watch. Yeah. Uh, good. Andrea says the Hildebrand brothers Lord of the Rings art is good as well. Oh yes, okay, thank you. You did say A, yeah, Castell. Castell, not Castle. Yeah, yeah. All right, so NXCW, that's the name I'm gonna give you. Oh, I see. It's for your full name. Got it. Well, if I can call you Noah or Xavier, that'd be cool too. But again, like, whatever you prefer. Alright, Final Fantasies, and also, um, I guess we will get to the ramp, but you guys were saying some good things about, teaching too. You were subbing to get experience and hoping to for something to open up. You got treated like dirt. Yeah, that's unfortunate, especially as a substitute teacher. Like, you can't really have that much control, I bet. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I really do we'll get into the rant now. This is a good segue into to what I was kinda thinking about my rant on teachers. Um, I am in a really finally, after 8 years of doing this, I'm finally in a pretty good situation with my private music teaching, private music instruction. I have a handful of online students, not a lot, maybe 4 or 5, which is great. It's manageable. And then I actually work at a music store, and I I would just say the area that I'm working in, just great kids, great families, a huge it's just I don't know if it's the community or just the culture, but there's just something about the area I am in where the parents are they're not just highly supportive, they're just they make sure their kids are doing what they're doing. They wanna make sure that their kids are on target with whatever I'm giving them as far as instruction. And sometimes the parents are away on with their families, on vacation, and they have to apologize to me. I mean, they actually really do. Like, some of these parents are older than me, not by much, actually, some parents are even my age or younger, but they still see me as kinda like that role of authority saying, "Yeah, like, I really want my child to be better in music and make sure, like, she or he is just making sure things are lining up with the week," and I did not have that until working at this particular location. Before that, I actually had a really I wouldn't say bad experience, but just a droll experience teaching music, and the reason for that was, teaching, particularly beginner students in music, and particularly violin. Not as bad with piano, but piano had some rough patches too. The previous areas I worked at, the parents most I'm not saying this of people in general, but the impression was the parents just wanted their kids active in anything, which is fine. I think it's a good motive, it's just not good enough because, violin in the other areas that I was teaching at was more of a status, like a level of status that they could tell their kids were taking they could tell other people, like their coworkers and associates, that their kids were taking violin lessons. There's kind of this, I kinda make fun of this social situation, I talk about it with profs sometimes, and we kinda laugh about it, but it never fails. Every time people realize I'm in music, and then they realize, "Oh, yeah, you play violin?" I'm like, "Yeah, for 28 years I've been playing violin, 27 years," and they're not impressed that I've played almost 30 years of violin. They're more impressed like, "Oh, well, my granddaughter took 6 months of violin lessons or took a year of violin lessons." And then, like, the teacher in me, like, the snarky teacher in me wants to say, like, "Well, what happened after that?" "Oh, did she quit?" "Well, I didn't quit. I'm still playing." Now, I know there are some reasons students do quit, but on the whole, um, I just did not get that level of support as I get now. Um, I would say the, um, the the retention in previous locations was so awful. It was like being a dentist and pulling teeth. I would get a handful of new students, and then 2 to 3 months later, they'd all quit. And then I'd get more students, and then after teaching the same thing again and again, never teaching music really, just teaching, like, the basics of posture and technique. And then after that, when the student thought, "Oh, I didn't know violin would be this hard," then they would quit. I would get that constantly with the other locations that I worked at, but not here. I finally like, I have almost I have almost 25 students now, between the physical being in the room with them and then also online. It's a very good number. I would love to push it to 30 if I can. That would be really sweet. But I'm content with the 25. And, out of, like, the 20 at the music store, between 20 and 25 at the music store, I've only had, like, 3 or 4 students quit. And that is an amazing thing. It's not 20 out of 20 students quitting. It's only 3 or 4 because they wanted to move on to something else, and I'm like, "Oh." I mean, that's we're talking about Thanksgiving, like, that is something I am very, very grateful for. But with the increase of students, and here's where my rant comes in, I've picked up a lot of students, good students, very good-natured children, and also some adult students too. Very nice people to work with and to teach. But there's been this trend I've noticed with a lot of these different students from different ages, different backgrounds, but they s a good selection of these students have had teachers before me, whether one teacher or maybe multiple teachers. And the kid, parents will say, "Well, that this my child wasn't really happy with this teacher," or something like that. I'm like, "Okay, no problem. I'll do what I can with this piano student, for instance, or something." And some of these students are very reserved, they're very shy. Some of them are very good-natured, but they all have this common problem, at least right now. This is an initial problem. I've only been with them for, like, 1 or 2 months, but they have this all these new students have this common problem where they've had teachers that have not taught them the basics in music. They have not taught them the fundamentals. With violin, they have not taught adequate posture. And even more than that, they've not taught these violin students to read notes. And I don't know if if you guys are into music or you know of people taking lessons, or maybe you know people who have kids who are taking music lessons, but I have seen this quite commonly in the last 8 years of teaching, that when I call it I adopt new students because, from previous teachers, I'm like adopting these students with their bad habits, and some bad habits are bad technique. Some habits are just the teacher has not taught them how to read music. Now, first of all, I'm not knocking anyone who wants to learn how to play by ear, because there are some phenomenal musicians out there that can sing, that can play guitar, that can play any instrument, that can play piano phenomenally, having never read music before. So there are people out there, professionals out there, who have never picked up a sheet music. They've always played by ear, and they have great, great technique, and they have a great inner ear. They've got great memorization skills, good chops all around. So I don't want to say that you have to learn to read music to get better on your instrument, but most of the time you do. And I'll say this, this is just part of my music teacher rant. Every single student that I've adopted who have not, who has not learned how to read notes on a music staff, it really slows down the progress. I tell parents that all the time. I said, "Listen, we're gonna start with the basics again with the music notes, because if he or she does not pick up the music and start to read why notes go higher on a music staff or why notes go lower on a music staff, they're not going to learn music as fast as they can, because they're just guessing." So with violin, I'll talk about violin and piano, and maybe you guys might know this with guitar or something like that, but or any musical instrument. But with violin, with a string instrument in particular, the violin, the viola, the cello, the bass, we're really only working with 4 fingers. So, but we are working with 4 strings as well. So the student who gets the really bad, teacher technique saying, "Oh, just put your first finger on A string, then put your first finger on D string. Okay, A1, D1." Okay, that's all well and good. But I would say that, the problem with that is they'll start reading, like, the melodic line on the sheet music, but then they think they're playing the on the right string, where in fact they are playing the right fingering, but on the wrong string or on the different string. But they don't know that they're doing that because they're not seeing the actual note heads go up or down in pitch. If they go up in pitch, chances are you're gonna play on the A and E string. If they go down in pitch, chances are you're playing on the D and G string. But they don't know that. They don't have the basic fundamentals to actually recognize that, and it really, really slows their progress, even if they have a good inner ear and memorization skills. Now, I took on some new piano students. Now, I'm not a pianist. I can teach comfortably. I can analyze piano scores. I can play more or less intermediate piano. I'm not advanced in piano, but I know all music fundamentals and I know piano. I know how to read piano music and all of that pretty well. I can analyze pretty complex piano scores even. So I could probably comfortably teach the student up to 3rd year, maybe end of 2nd year, depending on the progress. So I've been, adopting all these new piano students who are in their 2nd year. I'm like, "Oh, okay, 2nd year. Okay, this is gonna be a challenge to me. I gotta be ready. Gotta be ready to know what I'm talking about and stuff like that." And, and I just realized something. Ah, oh, crud. I'm on the wrong. Anyway, hopefully you guys can hear me okay, but, let me know if I'm stuttering at any point. Actually, if you guys don't mind, what I'm gonna actually put myself on mute, change my Wi-Fi, and make sure all my devices are off. 1 second. All right. Is that better? Yeah, yeah, I was seeing kind of the halo, so my lovely prof, my handsome prof says, "You glitched out then, but we can still hear you. I figured you might be on the wrong Wi-Fi." Yeah, I can't hear myself, but I saw the glitch. Okay. Yeah, now that looks better. Sweet. Before I begin, let's go ahead put up Studio Super's chat. Yeah, I remember an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond where Ray tries to relearn piano. His mom is excited at first, but then gets frustrated. She has to teach him the basics again. Yeah, Professor Geek talked about that episode. I've seen a few episodes of Everyone Loves Raymond, but he was talking every time I kind of rant like just between him and me about my day. He'll refer to that episode, that exact episode, and I think it's like there's a color of the book where it's like the like, 1st year or even the first, few tries. Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. Um, and this is kind of where the rant comes in. So I've been adopting some piano students who are in their like, wonderful kids, but they're in their 2nd like, according to their books, they should be in their 2nd year, pretty competent in their 2nd year. I'm like, "Oh, good, I'm not teaching the basics, okay. This is gonna be a challenge for me because I'm more comfortable with violin, obviously." But then they'll have all their pages marked with stickers and stars, indicating to me that they have completed the song and the page, and then when they play it for me, it is so evident that they don't have any concept of beat or rhythm or expression, how loud something should be, how soft something should get, how like the understanding of phrasing, and musical expression is completely absent. And they it strikes me as, you know, I think some of these teachers, whoever they were just happy with getting the kid through the song, like, at 60% or 70%. Some of these kids, when they're playing their songs, they need a couple weeks, and I tell their parents, I'm like, "Listen, I don't know about different instructors, but I'm one of those instructors that I pretty much I'm not too strict, but I'm pretty much that teacher who wants the piece in the book performable. I call it performable, like able to be performed at a recital before moving on. Now that's a little on the strict side, but that is a standard I do have. And when it's not quite there, but it's almost there, like they're getting it, I'm like, "Okay, that's like 90%, 95%. Let's move on." But some of these, students were like I would go into saying, "Hey, measure 5 here, getting into, like, at the end of measure 8, this is what this happens, and you missed it." And then a lot of people, a lot of students will come to me saying, or at least look at me, they'll turn to me, from the piano and say, "Well, what are you talking about? Why why isn't it written like this when it should be written like this?" I'm like, "No, no, no, it's actually supposed to be written like that because X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, this is basic stuff, and whoever was teaching them before didn't take the time or didn't have the patience or maybe even the credit, the musical acumen to just get these poor kids just getting the fundamentals down. I'm kind of feeling for these kids because maybe they know it, maybe they don't know it. I'm trying to gauge where they're feeling with all this, but a lot of it is they're committing the they're getting better at the piece of music because of what they hear me play, which is good. They have a good ear. That's good, and they have good memorization skills. And once they hear the beat, they can get it. But until I play it for them, it's a lot of guesswork for something that should not be the case at their current level. And so, that's kind of a frustration that I have. I'm not like a crazy hard-nosed teacher who, takes out the stick, you know, theoretically takes out the stick and whacks their hands or something yeah, I'm not like an abusive teacher, but I do have standards. And in here, at least in the United States, I can't speak for any other country, we don't need to be certified to be music teachers. On the one hand, I'm okay with that because I'm already serious about music and about teaching music the right way. But then, on the other hand, I think, shoot, if some other countries are, asking people to go through a certified test before you can teach music in the real world, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense too. Now, the reason why I'm on a certain pay is because I do have 3 music degrees. So, I mean, the certification in a way is already in the degrees that I do have, even if it's not an actual physical certification. But unfortunately, I can't say I know everything, but I get the feeling that a lot of people are telling parents and telling students that they are music teachers when they're not giving when they're not being good music teachers. I think that's my rant. And this kind of can translate all the way over to, what you want to do if you are doing it. It's like there is nothing wrong with revisiting the basics. I mean, for anything. And if you ever find yourself, whether in your art or in some other vocation where you feel like you're guessing, where it's mostly guesswork and you're not comprehending what needs to be um, grasped, then I would say, yeah, that's where people need to go back to the basics. So that's my rant on teachers. Maybe we can continue with the discussion, but that's in the chat. But that's what I've noticed with adopting new students from different teachers is like there's this one. Actually, I thought he was, like, in his late 20s because he looks really old, but he's only 17. Um, he is level 5 violin. He is year 5 playing violin. He can play 5th year violin difficulty, and no one bothered. I just feel for him. I'm like, I'm really getting back to the basics with him and his technique for violin because he's playing very difficult music with very bare minimum technique that had to be really had to be overcome by the end of year 1. And he's a great guy, and he's really open to learning the new stuff, but no orchestra director or no music teacher had ever told him to express a lot more with bow, for instance. Like, uh, he the music he plays requires pretty much 80% of your bow for your violin bow, and somehow, miraculously, he can manage to do the whole piece with only, like, 20% of his bow. And, but it's not his fault, like, he just wasn't instructed, so, like, I wanna keep doing the hard music with him, but saying, "Hey, let's make sure we're getting this just right so you will actually feel the actual expression, the actual artistic expression of this, song we're working on or this piece we're working on." So, anyway, that's all I had to say. Let's get back into the chat. Brian Gilmartin says, "I'm surprised that so many teachers forget to teach the fundamentals to the students." Yeah, or at least stick it with them, like, stick it to them, you know what I mean? Like, have the students stick with it at least for a while until they don't need that until they can comprehend that on their own. Wonder if that says something of their own education. Could be. Yeah, it could say a couple things, like, it could be lack of education, or maybe just forgetting the fundamentals themselves, or just being lazy, saying, "Ah," like, in kind of a, sad way, my prof was saying, like, maybe they're just waiting for the next monthly check to come in and say, "Well, I'll just get you through this month, and then and I don't have to bother with you," just, working on that, so, I don't know. I really want my students to be able to know why this bit of instruction is so important, because the my one objective behind it is music playing will be so much easier after that. Yeah, and it takes a couple years to get over it. There's a hump, like, it takes a little bit to get over that, that hill, but, once you do, like, music is enjoyable. It's playing music is an enjoyable experience. Understanding music makes playing music a lot more fun. It's just I can't imagine only guessing how to do something when it comes to music. Samuel Proctor says, "When I was in advanced illustration class in high school, my, teacher went into the basics of shadow values and line weights." Well, that's good. I was a little smug in my experience. I thought I was far beyond it, and I thought I'd never do it again. Now I appreciate it. Even experienced artists need, to return to the basics to refresh. Absolutely. Hello, Brothers Crin. Welcome. Never seen you before, but welcome. Hello, Mrs. Geek. Hope you are well, madame. I'm about to become an ESL teacher next year over in Japan. Ah, so desu ka. Over in Japan. Any tips for a first-time teacher? Let me if you can clarify, is it a classroom setting or is it one-on-one instruction? Or like a tutoring, for instance. That would definitely be helpful to know. Studio Super, thank you again for the super chat. Interesting composer fact. Let's see. For Superman, the movie wanted Jerry Goldsmith, who is a good composer, to compose for the film. He was on another project, so they described it as so we had to settle with John Williams. Well, I'm sure they're glad that it happened that way. I mean, I did one day, I promise, guys, I'll do more music analysis videos. They just take forever to make, but, back gosh, it was my gosh, back in 2020, I did a music analysis on just the melody alone of the John Williams melody of Superman, and, there's so much in that melody, like, so much, and I only did the main melody, like, it was almost a 45-minute analysis. I could have been probably snappier about that, like, a little quicker about that, but it was just the melody alone was it's well, no, that whole first part of the melody had a lot, um, had a lot of substance. Let's see. Comic Skaters and welcome. Do you think there's an age limit for achieving mastery of an instrument? No. Oh, okay. I'm gonna actually put this up. This is a really good question. Do you think there's an age limit for achieving mastery of an instrument? So this is based on my own experience, and I think people ought to understand this. Let me grab a swig of water. I have students from 4-year-old let me say that again. I have students from 4 years old to 74 years old, and I've known of people in their 90s picking up an instrument for the first time. I will say there is no age limit to learning an instrument. What will be the what will determine if that person can, despite their age, is actually their physical ability. Now, there are limitations. There are physical limitations immediately with something like singing. You do reach a peak, even if it's a long one, even if it's in your 50s or even 60s, you do reach a peak when it comes to vocal development in the way of opera singing, for instance. I don't know exactly the physiology and the age threshold for something like opera singing, but as far as vocal singing, oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no age limit to that. Your voice, of course, and your body will function differently than someone who is just developing their voice. Looks like I'm glitching again. Am I glitching again? Probably not. No one's saying anything, but that's okay. um, very good question, Comic Skater. So it really will depend on the physical ability. So I have a lot of adult students, and I would say how many now? Just 3. It was more than that for a time, but I have 3 adult students in their mid-60s and older. And I had one very nice, wonderful, very sweet man in his late 70s, I think. He just retired as, he was an owner of a Thai restaurant. He and his family had, set up a Thai restaurant, um, and he very nice guy. I in fact, I don't know where the restaurant is now. He wanted to take 2 lessons a week. I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he was willing to learn. He wanted to learn. I saw in his face and his expression, he was so happy to learn. And I saw him twice a week for about a few months. And then I stopped seeing him, and I started asking, the manager. I said, "Hey, is there something that, like, what happened?" And they didn't know, but my guess was because I saw it in the lessons, he was having an extremely difficult time holding the bow and also handling the neck of the violin for finger placement because his joints, they could bend, but they had just a shape to them. Like his fingers had just a natural built-in shape to them. Probably that came with age. Probably that came with after, being 70 years old, that just he could see it, I could see it. I was trying to manage it as best as I could, but we both kinda said like, he actually had broken English anyway, but we both kinda understood each other saying, "You know what? I like the violin, but I can see in my hands that this is not going to work." So it's not so much the age, it's actually the physical capability because there are people who are physically disabled or have different issues with their joints or their limbs or something like that, where it would be too hard to play violin even if they were 14 years old. So the limit is the physical capability. It isn't the age. I say this because I have come across a lot of parents who are in their 30s who not so much here where I am at now, but they would make their daughters, for instance, they would make their daughters play the violin because always wanted to play the violin and my parents never let me. I'm like, "Well, why don't I teach you violin lessons?" "Oh, no, 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 no. It's too late for me." I'm like, "You're 34 years old. Let me teach you some good violin technique and send you on your way." And they didn't like that idea. They were very shy about that. They're like, "No, I mean, I'm an adult now. I can't learn music. I can't learn violin." And I'm like, I teach people in their 60s and they love it, And but they always wanted they made that was the frustration I had. There's a lot of parents I met over the years made their kids learn violin because it was kind of a wish fulfillment. It was like, well, my parents didn't let me play violin, even though I really, really, really wanted to. And I always asked my parents, and they never thought I could do it. And by the way, that's awful. Like, I get it if you can't afford lessons or if you can't. Maybe there's something going on in the family where you can't financially support the kid with learning music. I get that, but there's this kind of like resentment like these adults have. They're like, well, I'm mad at my parents, so I'm gonna be the good parent and give my child the violin lessons that I always wanted. And like I see the face of the kid. They're like, I don't want to play violin, and that was so hard for me as a teacher. So on the age, that was a really great question, Comic Skater. On the age, no. The limitation is not the age; it's the physical ability. Now, some even teachers would disagree with me on that. But especially with adults, not every adult student I've had, but I will say this about my adult students, they have a lot more willingness to learn, even if they don't practice. Some of my adult students have a hard time practicing because 'cause they're busy, they're adults, right? But, even so, they still have more of that resilience to keep practicing because they're paying for the lesson. I mean, there's something about, like, needing to get better, to in order to pay. Well, because you are paying. You're paying for a service, you gotta make the most of that service. And I'm kind of in a s kind of a funny way, I'm a little bit more strict with my adult students because I want to make, I mean, not in a bad way, in a friendly way, but I want to make them get every cent, get every single bit of value out of their lessons, and sometimes they'll go at their own pace, and that's fine, and I try to gauge that, but anyway, that was a great question, comic skater. Studio Super, thank you so much for your other super chat. Uh, figure drawing class was the best thing to ever happen to my art. I also take art inspiration from Adam Warren. I think I'm familiar with Adam Warren, Frank Cho, Bruce Timm, and John Romita. Cool. So definitely comics. Yeah, those are comics names, right? Yeah, that's cool. Oh, bye, Ace. Thank you for coming and stopping by. Let's see. Brothers Crin says, you think it will be a classroom. Okay. So, Brothers Crin, I would say, it's been many years since I've been in the classroom experience. It's been almost 12 years since I got that kind of education. What I would, excuse me, one second. What I would do, well, here's what I would expect. The Well, first, if it is Japan, I'm gonna expect this. I could be absolutely wrong. If you are going to Japan, which sounds awesome, and you're teaching ESL, there is this cultural expectation that I do have of the Japanese culture, only because I experienced it with music. And also, I lived in Seattle where there was a huge Japanese population, and I did ministry, Christian ministry with the Japanese people by way of teaching them English as well. What you will absolutely have to like, what you will expect, and this is a good thing, is they have more of a regimental education than we ever had in North America, or at least in the United States. Um, there is probably a stricter line of code, a stricter line of thinking rather, a stricter code, an educational code. I think everything will just be stricter and a little bit more regimental, unless something culturally has shifted in the Japanese culture in the last 10 years, of which I'm not familiar with. But if nothing has changed, then you can be sure that they treat their education pretty seriously. And they're also going to treat learning English seriously. I kind of wish we were required to learn and stick with a language in the United States. I wish we were bilingual, but most of Americans are not, and because English is such a prevalent language. I'm a little remiss about that. I should have stuck with Japanese when I was learning Japanese. But in music, like in the Japanese culture, as far as music education is concerned, is crazy strict. So, what if it is a classroom, you probably would this is a completely educated guess, but you probably will expect a higher respect for the education experience, meaning they will respect you. You might have because of that, you might have a lot more expectations from colleagues and supervisors because of that. It might be a little bit more regimental on your part for teaching and curriculum building and stuff like that. But I would say that's a good thing, by the way. I would rather, just based on my own experience in teaching, I would rather be so hardcore with my curriculum and my work. Like, I would do more work for slightly less pay if it meant that my students are getting the appropriate music education. I am so fulfilled when people are fulfilled learning music, and I would prefer that to getting even more pay and being sloth-like, and then having my students be sloth-like and not learning music. There was nothing like, I was pa job-wise, I was paid pretty well as a music teacher in these other locations, but it was like pulling teeth not seeing any progress. I hated it. Like 80%, 90% of my students never made progress with the other locations that I taught at the other states. This is different from where I am, and I love it. It's such a blessing. So that's what I would expect. But that's the first thing about the classroom. I would say I don't have the classroom experience. Now, my husband has, because he's a professor, so it might be worth, asking him maybe in a chat, sometime for his live streams. What where I would say is the small experience that I've had in classrooms, first of all, know their names. There is something about students really looking up to you when you know their names, and you address them by their names when they're asking a question or answering a question. Make sure they're heard, make sure they're listened to, they're that their questions are taken seriously. That's probably my best guess. If you were doing, like, ESL in an American setting, chances are you would actually have to work a lot with classroom management and how to deal with kids. And actually, I wanna mention before I forget, David Stewart did a I can't remember if it was a video or he talked about on his stream, because he had both the private lesson and also the public education experience as a teacher, because he was a band director, I believe, for a time, both for, I think, public or, can't remember, like, I think in high school and maybe in college. And what did he say? Yes, he recently wrote a blog about this, and he was saying this, and this is absolutely important for all teachers. You are not the kids' parents, out of respect for the parents, but you're also not in the role of any parent. Like, even if the student saw you as, like, their surrogate parent, you have the responsibility to say, "No, I'm a guardian of this knowledge. I wanna make sure, like there's an innocence about the kid that you have to protect, and you have to have that really respectful space between students." And, um, there's a natural motivation among all teachers at first, if they first start the job, saying, I wanna help kids. I wanna help kids learn. I wanna help kids grow. I wanna help kids thrive," in my case, in music, for instance. And there's a good motivation behind that, but then there's also this weird, if the teacher isn't careful, they'll see themselves, like, as a surrogate role, like a legal guardian. You're not a legal guardian. You're a guardian of knowledge, but you're and of your subject, and you're a guardian of, like, helping the kids grow in this specific field, but you're not a legal guardian. You're not at least in the United States, there's a very strict code, or there ought to be. Well, at least with the, because I applied for a substitute position and we had to go through some training, but it's a very sensitive thing. Like, so I would say it might be different with people in Japan. Definitely different with people in Japan, but always just respect the space between you and the student. Like, even if you don't mean to, it's very easy to assert yourself as, like, that surrogate role when that's actually not appropriate. Wow, man, I went on a rant after that. Uh, yeah, Studio Super, I agree. I love, the love theme of the Superman the movie. Yeah, I need to listen to it again, but it's not, I mean, John Williams, I mean, he shines throughout that movie, among other movies. The Andrea says, "Does anyone find it funny that everyone is a teacher, sound engraver, or the professor, fan man?" Yeah, fan man is a English comm teacher, professor as well. Is Big Al secretly a professor? Yeah, maybe. He is, he is the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. I don't know if that made sense. I saw that movie a long time ago. Probably wouldn't recommend it now. I mean, people, yeah, anyway. My point is Big Al is the professor of sunshine and positivity. All right. Brothers Corinne says, "I'm ironically not a weeb, but, rather a Japanese history major." Oh, good, good, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love Japanese culture. I'm actually not into anime myself. I love the language, I love the traditional music and the instruments, and I love the culture. I thought for a long time in my early 20s I was gonna go to Japan, but that just never was for me. I realized later it just I thought it was gonna be the thing of my life, but now I'm happy and settled. Let's see. Gigawatt, welcome. You're putting up a name, arthritis, and I don't know the reference, so I'm sorry. Comic Skater says, "You're 50 and getting back into playing bass and learning, sure seems harder. Appreciate the input." Oh, yeah, absolutely, and oh my gosh, are you talking about well, bass guitar is a lot, and then, upright bass is a lot too, but, yeah, that's a I will say this is really, it's so hard for me. I pretty much have to give a disclosure to all my adult students, especially who are older. Like, I will suggest things for them, and I said, "Can you do this? Can you physically do this?" Because 'Cause I'm not a physical therapist. I don't wanna give them any advice that could actually damage their hands. So I say, "Hey, I this is the technique, but I don't want to have you overexert yourself in ways where it would be painful." Yeah, it's a very delicate topic, but, in Comic Skater, if you have the discretionary income and you have the time in your schedule, I would look into actual instruction, and not even online instruction. I would seek out a music store with someone who is capable of playing bass and helping you. Sam Reflector says, "It's not the age, it's the mileage." Um, let's see. You guys are talking amongst yourselves. Private Eye says, "It's ironic. My mom was a sports fan and forced me to play. I hated it. My dad wanted to learn guitar and forced me to play. I hated it. I wanted to learn to draw. They hated it." It's so it's so sad. It's so sad. Parents are not perfect. No, they're not. But I hate those parents that force their children because they couldn't when they were young. I try to approach it gently, but it's a very incorrect mindset. Because I guarantee you, I tell you the truth, every time I ran into a parent with that wish fulfillment or wishful thinking, I don't think they wished this upon they wanted to see themselves in their children. I think that's probably a very natural reaction parents have. I'm not a parent myself, but I can imagine that's a very, um, understand it's a natural reaction, it's understandable, but my parents supported me because I already had an interest in music. They saw that I had a natural ability in music, and then they were like, "Okay, we gotta make sure she doesn't quit." And sometimes they were really hard. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Maybe once or twice in my life, they were hard on me for practicing, but as soon as I started practicing, my mom said this about me and my twin sisters, like, "Oh my gosh, you guys wouldn't stop practicing. I had to tell you, I had to come into the room and tell you, you gotta do your homework before going to bed." So we were kind of anomalies in that regard, like, we couldn't stop practicing. Private Eye also says, Your parents were good parents, just, they had those, types of things that all parents have." Yeah, I think it's natural, and I think it has to be said of, like, from a counselor or an advisor. I think I don't know if parents actually know they're doing that. Um, I had this one girl, and I was so frustrated with her. Not here, not any girl I'm teaching now, but, she she was a bookworm. She was a very bookish child, which is great. She loved reading books, and the problem was she wanted to read her books in our music lesson. Now, this is kind of funny because it would almost make sense that she would do that if it was a classroom full of kids, which she probably does now that I think about it, but it was just her and me. I was like, "Okay, now put your book down." And I sort of try to insinuate I try to like, drop hints to her dad at one point. I'm like, "She reads a lot of books. Have you thought about getting her into some writing club or book club, like homing her, vested interest in books. So, all right. My chair is squeaking. Oh, Studio Super, thank you so much. The League of Professors. Someone make a comic of that already. Yeah, I think we had someone, Wolftan Media, he used to be coming. I see him occasionally, but not as much anymore. But he had he would come up with like Star Wars names for us, but I can't remember what they were. Like my first name was Sun, and my surname was like Gravis or something, Sun and Graves or something. I can't remember. Yeah, it was great. Oh, arthritis. Oh, you okay, thanks for correcting, Jigawa. Yeah, older student you were teaching probably had arthritis. Yeah, I and his English was so broken, so I and it's really it sounds kinda strange, but it's none of my business to get into their physical and health matters, unless they talk to me like, "Oh, I've had this pain, I've had this trigger finger." I've like a lot of my older students would un o overcome would have to go through things like surgery to remove their trigger finger and stuff like that, but even so, it's like, "Well, you rest. I know you can't practice, but in no way would I in no way would I tell them, like, "Oh my gosh, you have to do it this way," and then they would have to go to the doctor. Like, what if they had to go to the doctor because of something I had caused with my instruction? It's like, no, no. Um, Brian Gilmartin is mentioning tiger parenting. I'm not familiar with that term, but it pretty much that's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah. I try to be very careful, because I don't judge parents because I'm not a parent, you know? Because, like, what would I do in a situation? Like, like, let's say I had a kid who had some just amazing athletic skills or acting skills or something, like, the propensity would be, "Yes, let's get this child and all the right clubs and practices and stuff like that, and then have them just thrive and then make a career out of it and stuff like that." I was a very atypical kid. I knew I loved music. My career changed. My choice always changed. At first, I was gonna be a world-class violinist and tour the world, and then it was gonna be a public orchestra director, and that changed, and then it was gonna be a college professor in music, and that changed, and then it just came down to teaching music, and I perform when I can, but, it's usually teaching. I definitely wanna do a lot more, electroacoustic music with my violin and voice with my electronic music, so a lot more original music in the future with my violin. I gotta get back to violin. My wonderful prof for an early Christmas present gave me, a plugin that's really I think it's gonna help sweeten the violin sound. I'm pretty excited. Thank you so much, Studio Super, for your wonderful, generous super chats. In response to Private Eye, there are a lot of parents so determined to give their kids what they didn't have, right? They can sometimes lose sight of giving them what they did have. Yeah, like, yeah, it's a delicate balance. One thing, like, I can brag about this for the rest of my life. My dad was so supportive. My parents lived in different locations when my sister and I grew up, and he lived about 2 hours away. But he no matter what the workday was, he no matter the weather, the rain, he always made it to my concerts. And I knew as a kid, like, how far he would drive just to get to my concerts. Like, that is one thing I'll always remember my dad for, is, like, he always made sure he got to my concerts. Like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, as long as parents, like, go to, like, different shows or ceremonies or something, I think that's where it's at. Um Private Eye says, ironically, your mother didn't like to read, but she was a teacher and knew that that was the most important thing you could do. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good lesson. Like, you don't have to like something to do something, if it's really important. Yeah, that's good. She had that self-awareness, like, "Okay, I'm a teacher, I need to read, and I need to read a lot." Yeah, it's great. It's great. Amy L says, "Trigger finger has nothing to do with age. When I got trigger finger, I didn't know what it was. My mom told me she had it when she was young." Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not saying it's age limited, but thank you for saying that. Excuse me. It was, my students who have had it have been in their upper 60s and stuff like that, yeah. Anyway, so it is coming on the hour. That was actually pretty fun. It was kind of a rant, but not really a rant. I wasn't expecting it to be. But, yeah, I would just say, like, wherever you are, like, level-wise, maybe you are year 5 or you are year 8 or 10 in your artistic endeavors. If there's something that you haven't grasped or your form can be better because of some basics, it's so important. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but I just try not to even think about it, even if it is, but, um, I know I have talked to a lot of music teachers who yes, on the one side of the spectrum, it's really strict abusive teachers, and they shouldn't exist. You shouldn't be a teacher if you're gonna be abusive to, a kid verbally or whatever. But then there's the other side where I've met on the spectrum where it's like they're like, "Oh, music class should just be fun." I'm like, "Yeah, making music should be fun, no question, but I tell you, at least in my experience, it's not been fun for anyone until they know how to do it. As soon as the child or even the adult knows how to do something, they finally get the joy. That they'll ask me like, "Why do we have to do this?" Like, "Well, oh, do we have to do this? I don't wanna do this." And I'm like, "Listen, once you know how to do it, it's gonna be great. You're gonna love it so much better." And they don't believe me. And unfortunately, some students do quit before they even get to that point. But those who do, they're like, "Oh, yes. Now it's fun to play these songs," and stuff like that. Um Let's see, Brothers Crin. This is probably a good concluding question. I appreciate the earnest advice. I hope it was good. I don't know how right I am about all of that, but you sounds like you got some good prospects heading your way, so that's good. Also for music, what is your favorite composer of all time? Like one composer? I don't have a one favorite composer. I will throw out like a list of classical composers. Okay, I'm sure I'm skipping a lot as far as chronology. Um, Vivaldi, Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, um, Debussy, Ravel, Stravinsky, Gershwin. I know I'm missing so many great composers. I'm sorry. Uh, Puccini, as far as opera, there's so many. And then into the more experimental orchestra and experimental stuff of the 20th century, Lachenmann, Subotnick, John Chowning, um, George Crumb, especially. So many. So that was a list. I can't just single it to like narrow it down to one composer. I mean, if I was tried, if I was told I can only listen to one composer forever, sheesh. Probably Vivaldi. Like, I don't know. But that would be an impossible question. So anyway, uh, Brothers Crin says you obviously know more than I do. I mean, thank you, but like I'm a music professional, so I hope I should know more than the average bear. But I gotta work harder on listening more to more classical musicians. Oh, same here, by the way. I need to get better about listening to classical music. Um, but when I do listen to classical music, it's quite nice. Um, Samuel Proctor says there's one thing I'm considering in my own art: ambidexterity, drawing with my left hand. I've heard it's a very freeing thing for artists, for the artistic mind. It's worked for Da Vinci. Yeah, I don't know about that as far as actual sketching and visual art, but I would say you can't do that with the violin, no matter how many people say, "Oh yeah, you can." I'm like, no. I was like, my child is left-handed, so should she play the violin on the left hand? I'm like, yeah, because everyone else does. Um, anyway, so I think I've got a couple things to do before the night ends, so we'll wrap it there. We'll wrap it up there. But thank you guys so much for attending. I love talking about this. I didn't think how it was going to be that interesting to a lot of people, but teaching is important. Artistic endeavors, that those all those are important. So anyway, uh, no, nothing really on the dock as far as I can see this week because I'm really busy with projects. If I do have something, that'd be great. But I would just say look for it. Oh, once I take, it's Christmas. Like we gotta write out cards and do some house projects and stuff like that. Visit someone. We gotta visit someone. I won't show you who we have to visit. But in any case, oh, Bob, thank you. Someone named Bob is here. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad you left that in the chat. So as always, as I can talk, as I always say, thank you so much for watching and listening. Thank you for a wonderful engagement at the chat today. You guys had a lot of really good stuff to say. I always thank you for your support. Thank you, Studio Super. If you guys want to check out his Twitter, yeah, if you wanted to write your Twitter handle again, Studio Super, it's all the way up on my list and I can't retrieve it right now. But check out his art on his Twitter page, and I think we'll leave it there. So thank you so much for watching, listening, and until I see you next, keep producing, preserving, and promoting that good art you love, and I'll catch you later.